have a pen. Thank you. I now call this regular meeting of the Board of Education to order at 7:10 p.m. We'll take a moment of silence to be followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Yeah, okay. All right. Have the coordinator call the roll.
Okay. Mr. Dixon, Mr. Rollins.
Here.
Mr. Scrivano.
Here.
Mrs. McCulloch.
Here.
Mr. Siegel.
Here.
Mr. Connor.
Here.
Ms. Stanford.
Here.
With 6 present, 1 absent, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Before we go any further, I'd like to thank Rod and Connor, who are working behind the scenes to produce the broadcast on our favorite TV channel, Channel 20. So thank you guys for your ongoing support of making sure that makes us look good. I have a proclamation to read regarding Principal Appreciation Week. So I will do that now. Whereas school principals play an integral role in the education and growth of children in elementary, middle, and secondary schools across the state of Illinois, and whereas school principals are responsible for promoting education, building relationships with parents and teachers to ensure that each child receives services that meet their needs to excel in the classroom, and whereas it is the primary responsibility of the state of Illinois to preserve and improve resources for schools so all students have access to a quality education and foundation for a successful future, and whereas Illinois Principals Association, which represents over 5,300 educational leaders statewide, believes learning is a lifelong process and the education of our children is the highest priority. And whereas for that reason, the Illinois Principals Association is dedicated to developing, supporting, and advocating for innovative school leaders. And whereas educational leaders face many challenges in supporting and educating our young people, and it is through their perseverance and passion that Illinois continues to produce quality, career-ready students. And whereas we must continue to encourage, support, and recognize those who have a positive impact on Illinois students and the educational system in the land of Lincoln, therefore I, J.B. Pritzker, the governor of the state of Illinois, do hereby proclaim the week of October 20th through the 26th, 2019 as Principals Week, and Friday, October 25th, 2019 as Principals Day in Illinois to recognize principals and the Illinois Principals Association for all they do to help our children learn and succeed. So congratulations to all the great principals that we have and well-deserved recognition. So we'll give them a hand. Okay, we'll move on to petitions and communication portion of our meeting, when we invite the public to make comments. The First Amendment of the United States Constitution guarantees the rights of citizens to petition their government, as well as provides for freedom of speech. Also, the Illinois School Code requires that there be a time at regular and special meetings for public comment. Thus, we are following those mandates during this petitions and communication portion of our agenda. According to Board Policy 2.230, the public comments portion of the meeting is limited to a total of 30 minutes. The board will not respond to comments at this time. If it is appropriate, you'll be contacted in a timely manner by staff in response to your questions. In order to allow sufficient time for the business of the board and to conduct our meetings in an efficient and effective manner, we are requesting that you comply with the guidelines that are posted, and each speaker will be allowed no more than 2 minutes to address the board. It's not appropriate to address individual board members or individual administrators or discuss matters that would otherwise be confidential in such open meetings. I will call the names, and you have a clock on the wall to help you with your 2 minutes. We thank you for your interest and your cooperation in our guidelines. Our first speaker tonight is Mel Gilfillan, to be followed by Joe Miner.
Hi. Want to say thank you to the school board and the cabinet for letting us come up tonight and make a few quick points. I know we're going to be discussing the IASB resolution that has, come up with arming teachers, and we just wanted to get our opinion out there that we understand that there's a very strong need for school security in this day and age and the time that we live in. But our teachers did not go into this profession thinking that they'd ever be carrying a weapon. They're not law enforcement. We don't have that mindset. Teachers are trained to work with students and teach, and we believe this is a tough enough job as it is, to then add, carrying a weapon or anything that would, arm our teachers. The Rockford Education Association doesn't believe that's good for teachers, schools, kids, or anybody in the state of Illinois. And our parent organization, the IEA, also has the same beliefs. And we hope that here in Rockford that never happens, where we arm our teachers with anything but just knowledge. So thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Joe Miner, to be followed by Kawaya Jackson.
Okay, is it working? Okay. First of all, I would like to thank all members of the school board for the dedication and time that they allow our children in this district. I know it's a tough job, but the big bucks are worth it, I know.
Right. Okay.
My name is Joe Miner, and I am a resident. I am a grandparent in this school district, and I am speaking tonight on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Greater Rockford. The League of Women Voters is here to voice our concern about the potential for dangerous consequences of two IASB resolutions recommended for adoption at the November 2019 IASB conference. We urge the school board to instruct your delegate to vote no on both Resolution 1 and Resolution 3. Resolution 1 would provide local school boards the option to decide if they would allow for properly trained staff to be armed in school buildings. Resolution 3 would establish school safety grants to the school district can hire resource officers who may carry firearms, provided training is received. Schools should be places of safety. There is no evidence to show that arming personnel within a school increases school safety. These actions are contrary to conclusions in a 2015 New England Journal of Medicine evidence-based peer-reviewed study, which indicates that more guns do not make communities safer, but rather contribute to the rise in gun-related suicides and homicides in our country. We cannot risk introducing firearms into our schools. We should be working to keep guns out of schools. Please refer to our two fact sheets for alternate measures for school safety. In the future, please insist that ISB recommendations be data-based, utilizing evidence-based peer-reviewed research, which will give all involved the confidence that choices are based on the best information available to create the safest possible options for the safety of our school children, school district employees, and community.
Thank you.
And if I may approach and just hand you the resolutions.
Absolutely. Got one for everybody. All right, I'll have Laura pass these out. Okay. Okay. Thank you, Joe. All righty. Kawaya Jackson. Is that red light on the microphone?
It is now.
Okay, good.
Hello, I'm Kawaya Jackson, and I'm a student at Guilford High School. And I hope my face isn't that new to you, considering I've been here a couple of times before. In the past, when attending these meetings, I've tried creating an idea or sparking a thought on the ethical uphold of a major part of our district known as the school zone system. To be completely honest, I did a poor job at it, so I'm back again. I came here before to convince you that I was right, that the school zones are an injustice. I've come here now humbled and ready to further the picture I've created. As an ancient expression or idea that I have come to know and in fact found to be true, is derived from the study of religion by Helen DeLove. The idea is that if you put your religion or idea in a box and you throw all your doubts at it and all your thoughts, everything under the sun, then and only then can you truly believe doubt-free. So that's what I did. I sat on the idea or metaphorical box for days, weeks, and even months. every day asking myself, is this something I'm willing to stand for, or even if standing alone? And the answer is yes, 100 times over yes. If I don't stand on the undeniable gap of education in Rockford, who will? If I have to speak for thousands of students in the district RPS 205, I will. I will continue to paint a picture of why the claim of Rockford that Rockford has equal education for all is wrongfully untrue. From today and here on out, I'll present my case, my information, data, and proof to why the schools segregate and separate us. I'll be back in 2 weeks. Thank you, board.
Thank you. Okay, I'll ask if there are any board member comments at this time. Mr. Conner.
Yep, I want to note the passing of Mr. William Stokes, who was in the para-union and was very active for many years. And we'll say that my wife, who was a member of the para-union, and I talked when we saw the notice of his passing that he's an excellent guy, and he'll be truly missed.
Thank you. Any other board member comments? I'd like to welcome Dr. Vosberg to the big kids table. Okay. Okay. So, our superintendent is attending the Ford Next Generation Conference in Akron, Ohio, so hopefully his plane got there with all this wind. All right, we will now move on to the consent portion of our agenda, including the following: the meeting minutes of October 8th, payroll, accounts payable, purchase orders, construction bid request log and travel, the bid recommendation for computers, the recurring contracts for Abellis Firm of Architecture, Cumberland Therapy Services, and the RSP Associate Consultant Agreement. The other consent items, including the RPS Managed Work Change Order, the new school construction change order logs, the monthly cash and investment report through September of 2019, the ESL endorsement, the IGA First Amendment for Alternative Learning Opportunities Program, and the Freedom of Information log. Is there a motion and a second to approve these consent items?
So moved.
Mr. Conner?
Second.
Second by Mr. Siegel. Are there any consent items that board members wish to have pulled for separate consideration?
8A.
8A. Okay. Mr. Rollins?
9C.
9C. Okay. Okay, I'll have the coordinator then call the roll on the consent items not pulled.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Ms. Stanford?
Yes.
The motion passes with 6 yeses, 1 absent.
Okay, I'll now take a motion and a second for the approval of the bid recommendation 8A for computers.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor,
Second.
second by Mr. Siegel. Questions or discussion? Mr. Connor.
Just want to reinforce, we've said this a couple times, but this is a lot of money for computers. There's been a lot of thought put into this. And this arrangement for the leases, $3 million essentially over 3 years, is really a way that the administration has shown to reduce the amount of money that we're paying on that. And every time we have large expenditures and we can save, is a boon for us and makes our money go further.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Now I'll have the coordinator call the roll on the approval of the computer bid recommendation, item 8A.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Ms. Stanford?
Yes.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
The motion passes with 6 yeses, 1 absent.
Thank you. Now I'll take a motion and a second for the recurring contract 9C, which is the RSP Associates Consultant Agreement.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor,
Second.
second by Mr. Siegel. Questions or discussion? Mr. Rollins.
Is there, who should I address this to?
Mr. Phillips here.
Is this the group that, that did our demographic analysis when we did the rezoning, the elementary school rezoning?
That's correct.
All right, I don't know whether to pose this as a question or a comment. So the executive summary says it's as part of the 2012 Facilities Master Plan. It actually was much later, though. It was only a few years ago that we relied on their demographic analysis to rezone. And within, to me, it seems like 2 years, we've got buildings that are bursting at their seams. So I'm just going to ask the question, why are we hiring the same people to come back?
So one of the issues that we dealt with is we had changed programming, especially with the bilingual program, which is what's really impacting. So what we're asking them to do, they looked at the capacity and the demographics of the students in particular zones, but we made changes from a programmatic standpoint. So that's really what, we're looking at a comprehensive look across the district and the impact.
So you're saying that the problems we're having in those schools are because of programmatic changes that we made without
Yes,
giving
as
them that
part of
input
the-
when they did their analysis?
That would be my understanding.
Great. Okay.
All right. Any other comments? Mrs. McCullough?
Along those same lines, do we look at anyone else, or are we just blindly going back with the same group? I mean, is it better to have another set of eyes?
They have all of the data now, so it would be much more efficient. Mr. Phillips, your thought?
Yeah, I
and less
agree.
expensive.
They've dove into our City of Rockford demographics and census data, so they have an understanding. That's really just doing that deeper dive now into our programs at our different locations, the size of our classes, and how that supports our demographics.
So then the next question is, do they have enough information from us as to where our programs are going to be in the coming
And that's part of
years?
this.
Are we moving, or we're asking them so that we can move programs if building capacity is such that it's not going to
Right.
tolerate the increases, or what?
So there definitely, academics will be a part of this survey, and it's going to be imperative to have that type of information, and looking ahead going forward, where we see programs, certain programs residing, so.
There's a little girl out there who I think would like to be
Okay.
participatory.
Mr. Connor?
Yeah, a couple points on this one. Number one is that I'm not so sure who we've picked is at all the issue, because I think if you look at these skill sets, which are really statistical, they do what we ask them to do. So really, in that sense, I don't think who we choose is really the issue. The issue is, from my point of view, is a couple things. One is it depends on the cycle or cadence that you do this analysis. But I remember us talking very directly about the impact of moving some of the programs around and the domino effect that that had with schools and, as Mr. Rollins said, bursting at the seams. So I think there's a flexibility on the planning that we need to put into this that I don't think is systemic today, meaning that we do this and we sit on how we have allocated the zones. And I think this is probably a good time to start talking about how we can respond quicker to essentially demographic changes. And I'll use one example is Brookview, which I think is a crazy place right now from my point of view, because it is bursting at the seams. And all the comments I get from teachers are all, how can this happen to us? And I have no good answer for that, I will just tell you. And that's because we have our boundaries, and it's a pain. So let me give the other side to those of you that would care about this issue, is that people do buy houses and properties because they think, hi, this is my neighborhood school. That's a real thing. If you don't think so, you need to talk to people. There's a lot of misinformation about zones. There's a lot of misperceptions on it because you don't have all the facts and you don't talk to the people who are affected by this. So there's really a couple sides to this. People hate it when we change boundaries. On the other hand, if we don't think through this process correctly, you do have a situation like Brookview, which from my point of view is pretty unacceptable from the educational side. I haven't really said much, but I've been, sort of banking all the comments I get, which are universally negative. So what I would say is, this is going to fall back on us as a board and the administration to think through this process. So I would say the actual demographers are very good at their job, but it is us that must really come in and look at this process.
Other comments or questions? Now to have the coordinator then call the roll on the approval of the recurring contract for RSP Associates.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Ms. Stanford?
Yes.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
The motion passes with 6 yeses, 1 absent.
Okay, we'll move on to the closed session consent agenda items, including the appointment of Scott Jensen as a 12-month Director of Design and Construction, the HR organizational report and addendum, and student discipline unless otherwise modified below. The board adopts and accepts the hearing officer's findings and recommendations in the following cases in which students expelled or suspended are prohibited from being on school grounds and school-sponsored activities without the prior written permission of the principal. Students 4306, 4308, and 4310 are expelled for the remainder of this school year through the first semester of next school year, the 2021 school year. Student 4307 and 4309 are expelled for the remainder of the 1920 school year. And the following students have received EIAs, expulsions in abeyance: student 1069, 3949, 3950, 3952, 3955, and student 3956. Is there a motion and a second to approve the closed session consent items?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor,
Second.
second by Mr. Siegel. Are there any consent items that board members wish to have pulled for separate consideration? Seeing none, have the coordinator then call the roll on the approval of the closed session consent items.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Ms. Stanford?
Yes.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
The motion passes with 6 yeses, 1 absent.
Our next agenda item is the superintendent's report, which will be given by our deputy superintendent, Dr. Vosper.
Thank you, President Scrivano.
Okay.
I would just like to reiterate your proclamation earlier tonight about Illinois Principals Appreciation Week. It is also National Principal Appreciation Month, October, and Friday is Principal Appreciation Day. So it's a big month for our principals, and I have a lot of gratitude for the work that they do. It makes everybody's life at the big table, the grown-up table here, Ken. It makes all of our lives easier when we have good principals in our buildings. I think most of us have been in the system long enough to see that. We do have 11 new principals this year, and they're off to a great start, making an impact for students. I would say in 2019, the job is very complex, much more complex than when I started that work back in the early 2000s. We spent a lot of time today just talking about social media and the things that principals have to adjust to and deal with around social media, on top of their primary responsibility of providing a very productive learning environment for students. So it's a very important job. They do a lot of things, but one thing they don't do is watch school board meetings. So they're not going to hear this. So if anybody sees a principal this week, there's a couple, but most do not. There's a few out there, though. But if you do have a chance this week to thank a principal, please do that. They definitely earn their keep for us in our system.
Thank you. Okay, we are now on to our action item for tonight, which is item number 15, the CDW WLAN project that Mr. Barthel presented. Is there a motion and a second to approve this item?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Connor. Is there a
Second.
Second by Mr. Rollins. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, I have the coordinator then call the roll on the approval of the action item CDW WLAN project.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Ms. Stanford?
Yes.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
The motion passes with 6 yeses, 1 absent.
We are now into new business, and administration is asking us to suspend the rules as the district has experienced technology outages that have negatively impacted its daily operation. Additional labor will mitigate the recovery effort timeline. So is there a motion and a second to suspend the rules for the board to consider the IT consolidator labor contracts?
So moved.
Moved by Mr.
Second.
Connor, second by Mr. Rollins. Any questions or discussion? You now have the coordinator then call the roll on the approval to suspend the rules.
Ms. Stanford?
Yes.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
The motion passes with 6 yeses, 1 absent.
Now I'll take a motion and a second to approve item 16A, the IT consolidated labor contracts.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Rollins,
Second.
second by Mr. Siegel. Is there any questions, comments? Now I'll have the coordinator then call the roll on the approval of the IT consolidated labor contracts.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Mr. Scrivano?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch? Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Abstain.
Ms. Stanford?
Yes.
The motion passes with 5 yeses, 1 absent, and 1 abstain.
Thank you. Okay, our next new business item is the always stimulating and exciting school board policy revisions, which will be presented by our legal counsel. Well, there you go.
The first policy change that I'll present is for policy 4.32, which is the tax abatement policy. This is unique to the district, and so the changes that it makes currently, I'll start all over and try to be a little bit more articulate.
Okay.
The current policy limits tax abatement considerations to properties in enterprise zones, and the proposed revisions would allow the board to consider property for tax abatements for allowable categories under the current statute, which would include, but are not limited to, commercial and industrial firms and the river edge redevelopment zones. 4.32 is also outdated because it mirrors an old formula that had been used by the city of Rockford. And so it's drafted a little bit broad. So any changes that Rockford might make from time to time would make it allowable for you to piggyback on that particular, their particular ordinance. But you're not required to automatically grant any abatement, even if the city does so. So it would still require a board vote. Also, while the statute allows a simple majority to pass a tax abatement, the policy maintains the existing supermajority requirement. So 2/3 of the board would have to vote in favor of an abatement in order for it to move forward. All right, any questions on that one? All right, the other ones are statutory changes, and they have been reviewed by administrative staff. 4.170 deals with the safety policy, and it reflects statutory requirements under the School Safety Drill Act. So it sets the protocols and procedures for building compliance, and then it also requires automatic external defibrillators, which AEDs, in each building, as well as trained staff members in each building. The other, it deals with 5.220, the substitute teacher policy, and this policy was updated to describe short-term substitute teaching licenses, and that, again, is a statutory change. 5.230, simply reflects the criteria that corporal punishment may not be used to discipline students, and nor should anyone use disciplinary methods that may be damaging to students, such as ridicule, sarcasm, or excessive temper displays. So that simply reflects the statutory criteria. 7.70 deals with attendance and truancy criteria. And it aligns then with the school code requirements, which address enrollment enrolled students below or over any set compulsory attendance ages. And it also requires students who are family members of an active duty military individual to be excused. So those are the proposed changes. Any questions on those ones?
Mr. Rollins?
So on 5230, is that really just tracking the statutory and/or regulatory language?
The corporal punishment, it also deals with case law that's out there as far as no corporal punishment.
Well, what I was reacting to, I guess, is well, not so much ridicule, although even that's a little subjective, but sarcasm. I mean, really, sarcasm? You can't use sarcasm? I mean, we'd all be in trouble.
I know.
I know I would be. So I don't like having a policy out there that says that a teacher can get in trouble because they're sarcastic.
Right. That is not statutory language. That's the language that that reflects different case law out there, and that's proposed by our press, through press policy. That's press policy language, but I can adjust that.
Yeah, could you take a look at that and see if you can maybe find some different language for that?
Yes.
Excessive sarcasm or something? Okay.
And then,
I think I think it would be much more case specific, so I think we can take that word out in particular.
okay, thank you.
But I might be being sarcastic when I say that.
In which case you'd be in trouble. That's right. And then, I don't really have a question on the policy, but since we've got a policy here for substitute teachers, I thought I'd just use it as an opportunity to ask how our experiment with Insight is going.
I would say it's going well at this point. With all of our vacancies, they are communicating consistently with buildings. We have some long-term and short-term, but we will be gathering all that data to bring back to the board for a possible renewal or not a decision in terms of meeting the goals that we set out for them.
I'm not going to hold you to it, but how's
Yep.
their sub-fill rate looking compared to where it was
I would say we're
last
pretty
year?
consistent. They have increased the number of subs, but we're also up in vacancies, and so that contributes to some of the subs being tied up for some other fill rates. So we're pretty consistent to where we were at the year before.
All right, thanks.
Any other questions or comments on policies? Ms. McCullough?
Also on this short-term substitute teacher, so it says that short-term substitutes will have completed the district short-term substitute teacher training program. We already have that in place?
Yes, Insight has that as part of their professional
But Insight
development.
has
Yep,
that.
correct.
Okay, that's what I wanted to make sure, if they're providing the teachers, that they're providing that training. Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Now, these will be presented at our November 12th meeting for a vote. So our last item tonight is an item that I put on there. You should have electronically received the entire resolution for the IASB meeting that's going to be held Saturday, November 23rd. And there are 12 resolutions that are being presented, and each of the, I think, 850 school districts in Illinois get one vote, and you have to be present and officially checked in as the delegate. So I think one thing we need to decide is, that we will definitely have a delegate there to vote. And then how do we want to vote on these? So tonight, I really just wanted to have some discussion about the two that are seem to be controversial. There is also position statements revisions in there as well, if you have any comments on those, so that we know how our delegates should be voting. Laura did include the wording of the student safety resolution number 1 in your agenda. So you have that, but if you don't, you have it electronically, or like me, I printed it out. So I want to read it, actually, because I want it to be understood what we would be voting on. So it says, and this is submitted by Mercer County School District, which also submitted this same resolution last year. Be it resolved that the Illinois Association of School Boards shall support and advocate for legislation which provides local school boards the option of developing student safety and protection plans which allow voluntary district employees in any capacity, so that could be anybody that is working as a district employee, the ability to carry a concealed firearm on district property, provided that the employee has a valid Illinois FOID card, holds a certified Illinois concealed carry license, has completed all additional trainings and certifications set forth by the respective school board, one of which must include yearly certified active shooter training. Only district employees who fulfill all requirements listed and receive superintendent and board approval would be eligible as an active and armed part of the student safety and protection plan. And the rationale is explained, but I just want to hit a couple highlights. This proposal allows local school districts the option to have voluntary armed staff in their buildings, which right now the law says they can't do that. And the rationale pretty much is coming from, this is my opinion, is pretty much coming from the rural school districts in Illinois who have police response times that are 20 minutes or longer. And so they feel that this puts the students in the school at risk for that long of a response time. So they feel that that's significant. So I guess I would open the floor right now to comments and discussion. How do we want to handle this? Do we want to decide, or do we want to just discuss? So, anybody want to start? Mr. Siegel's going to be the brave one. Okay.
I think it's important to separate out what Rockford Public Schools would want for itself, or at least what this board would want for Rockford Public Schools, and what other school boards and other school districts around the state would want. And do we want to support other school districts being able to vote for a security measure that would probably be dangerous here? I personally would hate the thought of arming our teachers in a town that already has a fairly significant amount of gun violence. The schools have proven to be a place of safety. However, the calculus doesn't apply to school districts uniformly across the state. And for school districts that may have a single building that's vulnerable, where they're going to have a limited footprint, they're also going to have limited access to law enforcement or other security measures. I guess I kind of hate to take away one of their very logical and perhaps comfortable and community-wide accepted solutions. This would be a lot easier if we were just saying, are we going to arm our teachers? I think there would be significant and very easy agreement that we're not going to. Because frankly, our security already does a pretty amazing job. But I don't know. And I guess as much as I'm not a gun person myself, I kind of feel like for some school districts, this may be a measure that makes some sense.
You know, I guess I'll go second here. I'm not a gun guy. I think this is a real bad idea. Even though we have resource, I guess it's a luxury that we have resource officers from the Rockford Police Department in our secondary schools and available to all of our schools with a fast response time in the event of an awful event like an active shooter situation or whatever. What worries me about this, I could understand some rationale. I think there's a better way to do it. And what concerns me is that when we're all done being board members of this board, we're going to be replaced. And if this resolution passes, it would allow a future board of Rockford Public Schools to have the option to arm teachers. Even though maybe we don't think we would ever do that, us current board members sitting. So that also concerns me a whole lot. So, Mrs. Danford.
Speaking as a mother and a school board member, there are a lot of things about this proposal that scare me. The idea of teachers in my son's school with guns scares me. The idea of children in a school where police are 20 minutes out with no security, no teachers with guns, that scares me. So there are a lot of things to think about when it comes to this particular proposal. This doesn't just affect Rockford Public Schools, this is our entire state and all the other children that are in our state.
Okay. Anyone else? Mr. Connor?
I had asked a couple questions to make sure I knew what I was evaluating here. So I'd asked Mrs. Hoadley to, I brought up a couple questions and she had answer for it. And I think we've pretty much answered it, but I'd like it for the record on the legal side, what we're actually voting for here.
What the resolution indicates is that IASB, the Illinois Association of School Boards, would advocate for legislation to allow school districts or individual school boards to permit individuals to carry weapons, so staff members, volunteer staff members. So you wouldn't be able to require the staff members to do so, but there would be a voluntary process. I believe that was what you had asked.
There was one, yeah. The other was essentially, and I think Mr. Scrivano did say it is, it's not allowed today. This would allow those districts that do want it to vote it in.
Assuming that that's what the statutory language ended up being, right now there is no statutory language that I'm aware of that's out there being proposed, but the resolution would advocate on behalf of such language.
So to be clear, if we have a representative, they are still yet voting yes or no to the language that they're seeing in front of them, though, right? And
For the resolution itself,
Yeah.
to advocate
that-
for statutory language.
that doesn't preclude the legislature from changing something, but really, we have to kind of deal with what's in front of us, and it's the language that we see here is
Correct.
what we're voting yes or no to. And how many school districts are there that have a vote?
There's 850. And I think, if I remember right off the top of my head, about 600 or 700 voted last year, and it was narrowly defeated by about 100 votes.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
actually a fair amount, but okay.
Closer than a lot of people thought it would be.
Well, let me say this. I think the arguments are powerful on the personal level, and there have been some good statements from the public tonight on this. Very sympathetic to that in our situation. And I think one of the powerful arguments is a future school board could change their minds on this. You know, what I would say is it's even more true at the state level. They have much more control over this kind of a thing than we do. So there's always the factor of changing your mind, and it's a reminder to the public that all these positions are meaningful. But what I would say is, to me, what it comes down to is kind of self-determination I think for us, we would not see this as practical, but I find it very hard to restrict school districts that really would want to, whether I thought it was ill-advised or not. I'm uncomfortable for us saying that on their behalf they can't do it. And I know that that's the nature of the legislative process. I totally understand that. But I'm expressing I would say the wisdom of the positions I've heard is solid, but in terms of this actual rule, that I am uncomfortable for us stopping the self-determination of other school districts.
Currently, just to be clear, I believe we have, Dr. Vosberg, resource officers in every secondary school, and they are armed. That's correct.
Not every secondary school. We have one at every high school.
Okay.
And then I believe we have 10 additional that are in
Rotate,
zones and
right,
rotate.
okay.
But they have a quick response time.
Okay. And they do, and by law, an officer of the law can have a weapon.
Correct.
On school grounds. Mrs. McCulloch, are you next?
Yes.
I don't have any problem saying no. And in large part, it's because once you put the weapons in the school, especially with, and I understand that they have to go through other trainings, but this is not their profession. This is not their vocation, being a responder. And I would hate the thought of a student in the school getting hold of the weapon, or another staff member who might be unbalanced getting a hold of a weapon and being in the school who doesn't have one of their own. So I have no problem saying no, that I would not support it.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Siegel.
I guess I would just say that the voting for the likelihood of what a future board might or might not do is probably something that we don't really want to get into, because we do have the ability to make new policy, and we have the ability to go back and undo old policy if it happens to fit the needs of that time. I don't know. I agree with everything that you say, Jude, 100%. The idea of adding guns to a place where there are kids is alarming to me. But the reality is we're looking at that through the lens of an urban community. And there are so many school districts that grow up with a very different culture about guns. And they don't see it as the thing that prevents them from going outside in certain neighborhoods or going to school if they feel like their teacher is unstable and going to shoot them. They look at it from a lens where the gun is a everyday tool and have a great deal more responsibility and respect for that particular tool. Like I said, I am not a gun person. I have absolutely no wish to see them in 205. I would do everything I could to prevent them from showing up here. But I also don't want to be the person that tells school districts that see it as a very efficient and reasonable and responsible way to handle their particular safety issues.
I'm going to go ahead and read the resolution number 3 because it's so related. So this is School Safety Grant Program resolution submitted by the Wheeling Consolidated School District. It says, be it resolved that the Illinois Association of School Boards shall advocate for the creation and funding of a school safety grant program at the state level that would assist school districts in the hiring of school resource officers or school security personnel for the protection of students and staff. School resource officers in this instance shall meet the definition of Section 10-20.67 of the school code. School security personnel may include off-duty law enforcement officers or a law enforcement officer who has retired within the previous 5 years. School security personnel may carry a firearm in school if they continue receiving the same ongoing firearm training as active police officers. Priority in the distribution of grants shall be based on both geography, school districts with lengthy response times from first responders, and financial need, Tier 1 and Tier 2 districts, based on the evidence-based funding model in that order, would receive priority in the awarding of the grants. Their rationale says some proposed solutions specifically calls to allow school districts to arm teachers, have created strong division within the organization of the IASB, and even if adopted, have little chance to being passed by the legislature and signed into law by the governor. Additionally, just as a highlighted area that I highlighted, additionally, by requiring that the safety of our schools be left in the hands of current or recently retired law enforcement officers, we can sidestep the issue of having minimally trained teachers carrying weapons and adding to their responsibility. This proposal hopes to bridge the gap we saw at the 2018 Delegate Assembly. So basically what this resolution is to create a state grant program that would fund school resource officers in school districts. Any comments or questions on that proposal? Mr. Rollins.
Well, I'm the only one who hasn't spoken, so here's where I come out on this. Substantively, I would never vote to put guns in the hands of teachers in the Rockford Public Schools. I don't know, I agree with the comments about the rural districts, but this is a legislative issue. This is something for our state legislators to address. And every school district has state legislators. So what we're voting on is whether we want to direct our organization to use its lobbying dollars to lobby for this. And I'll be honest, this is not a lobbying priority for me. I wish they'd lobby to end unfunded mandates from the state legislature.
There you go.
That's my funding. That's my lobbying priority.
Right.
So I'm going to vote against it for that reason.
Right.
Not because I disagree with the concept. I'd have to think about it. Just because I don't think this is appropriate for the ISB to get involved in.
Okay. Any other comments on the third resolution that I just read? I guess what I would ask now is we have until Friday, November 22nd to make our decision about how we're going to tell our delegate to vote. And so do we want some time to think about this and discuss further? Or do you want to call for the question now? What's that?
It's under new business. Can we vote on it?
No, probably can't. Yeah, you're right. Okay, so then I would ask, I know this is politics, but I just kind of also want to say, it's not just about how we feel, it's about how our constituents feel. So I think we have to be good stewards of our community and what they would want. I think that's part of the political process, is we're here to represent the people of our community. So I would ask you then to set aside some time to read all 12 of the resolutions. Many of them are good. There's even one about compensating school board members, which doesn't have a chance of passing. But okay, so, but there's stuff about charter schools, and there's stuff about seating board members, and there's one kind of related to safety. It's about if you as a district have in the past ever hired, ran and employed your own police department, kind of like what Rock Valley does, you know, you could.
I think it'd be
So they want the right to be able to go back and employ their own police department. That's another great one is about school traffic zones and urging that they're what they call traffic calming measures around schools that would reduce speeding and things around school buildings, a really good idea, whatever. So take a look at all 12 of those so that we can decide. And we will discuss at our next board meeting then.
So
Yes.
can I ask on this? I would think that we need some wording of either a motion that we do for next time, whatever the, however we're going to do it. So if we say we're going to vote on this at the first meeting in November, it would seem to me we'd have to have some wording for that to consider, right? In other words, or are you expecting that we would come up with the wording that night, right? Because don't we have to do that twice, or?
We need a motion tonight? Is that what you're asking?
Well, what I'm asking is, so if we want to vote, and let's just say for the time frame, I'm assuming it would be that first meeting in November, or we have a
Correct.
second? Okay. So for that meeting, if we were to vote, you'd have to have some language. Who's going to make the language for that? And don't we have to have a,
You would
know,
have
the
to have
two
a
reading-
second. So it would be a motion to approve, or I guess it would be a motion to support the resolution, or a motion not to support the resolution.
If we need language on all the resolutions, can we just see, just have it on the agenda for the committee of the whole meeting? We can look at it, we have to hash over each one, but just have it on there
but we
just
need
as a
something
reading.
specific to vote on, is kind of my point, right?
In November, yeah.
Either somebody would have to come up with language that would say, you know, we're instructing our delegate to vote yes on the following things, or no on one, or et cetera. Somebody would have to put that together. That's kind of my point.
I'll work with the board president to come up with the language.
That would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, I would think we would have to have all 12 listed.
All I'm saying is somebody has to do
We
that.
support or oppose
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
That's 12 times we got to vote.
Agenda item, and then you ask which ones might want to be pulled, and we
Oh,
vote on
okay.
those separate.
All right,
You
okay.
don't have to go 1, 2, 3, 4.
All right.
Well, you could.
You could. Okay. All right, so thank you, all real important stuff for us to deal with, so, okay. I'm going to, as we discussed in our Saturday retreat, I'm going to add at all future meetings, the last item that I ask you all is, are there any action steps that we need to follow up on, or that administration needs to follow up based on tonight's discussion? So one of those would have to be, our legal counsel will put the proposed wording together on us so that we can vote on the resolutions. That would be one action item. Are there any other action items that need to be assigned to a board member or assigned to an administrator for tonight's agenda? I can't think of anything, so, all right. All right, I'll take a motion for adjournment. Moved by Mr. Connor, is there a second? Second by Mr. Rollins. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, same sign. We are adjourned at 8:09. Thank you.